very difficult to obtain. That's our subject matter today. And then I'm also going to touch upon being greedy for mundane achievements. Okay. And then there's also talking unnecessarily about mundane subject matter, practicing the scriptural rules and regulations only for the sake of following them and not for the sake of spiritual advancement. Associating with um, worldly minded persons who are not interested in advancing in Krishna consciousness. So out of these stumbling blocks in our devotional services, we're going to focus on the endeavoring piece. Okay. So first we must ask, what is over endeavoring? We kind of got an answer from up there. It's when we're trying to do too much to accomplish something. And we can all kind of feel that. And a good example of that is, when you eat, you kind of know when you're full, right? You don't have to be told when you're full. You realize, hey, I've had enough, right? It's very, there's no right or wrong way. And it's also very personal to each other, to ourselves. And so we're going to talk about that, the personal part too, because what is over endeavored to somebody else may not be enough for somebody else, right? So we're going to get into that. So can anybody define what's mundane then? What is the definition of mundane?
Thank you so much. Sorry.
I'm not sure what's going on. Okay, what's mundane? Yes.
Something that like something with routine.
Huh? Ordinary. Yeah, but from a spiritual sense, there's two definitions. Like ordinary, not very exciting. Yes. Okay, that's really good. That's really good. So the spiritual definition, if you look it up in the dictionary, there's one or two. So there's the first definition, which you guys described, and the second definition is it's temporary. Mundane is defined as temporary, which makes sense, right? So overachieving or overreaching for temporary things, that starts to make sense why that could be detrimental to our spiritual growth, correct? So first, we must ask also what our dharma is, right? You guys are making me, okay, enough. We're just gonna deal with it. Yeah, I'm good. Yep. Okay, so before we figure out if we're over endeavoring or not, we've got to figure out what we're trying to accomplish. And that's accomplished through our dharma, right? So the definition of dharma is human life, fulfilling our life's purpose, both materially and spiritually, is our full dharma, right? So on the material aspect, we're all born with certain skills, certain bodies, and these all stem from our past consciousness and activities from our past karma, right? So, and that gives us our current state of bodies and skills that we can use to fulfill our material dharma. All right, I was going to be picking off. Okay, now we can do this. All right. Can you move the slides? What's that? Yes. Yeah, that's fine. So foundationally speaking, in order to fulfill our dharma, we need to develop certain skills, right? So we may have the ability, we may be predisposed to certain things, but we definitely need to develop some skills to fulfill our dharma. A good example of this would be and then also the second part is, on the spiritual side, we also come with our karma to realize ourselves spiritually. So one of the things I want to talk about is example is Arjun in the Bhagavad Gita, right? So he was a warrior, and so he had to fulfill his dharma, material dharma, if you will, by fighting in the war at Kurukshetra, right? So in order to be a warrior, he had to develop those skills. So he practiced during his time of study, probably at the same ages as you guys are. He developed to be a great warrior, great strategist. He was physically fit, etc., etc., etc. somebody who can be not only a great soldier, but also be a general as well, right? So same thing. In order to fulfill our dharma, and take advantage of the, our predisposition, we have to also develop some of those skills to be prepared. And that's what you guys are doing here today, right? Or you're doing here in school, is to develop those skills that will help you be able to fulfill your responsibilities and duties and live in this world, right? So that's part of dharma. And then the second piece of it is the spiritual dharma, right? What's our spiritual dharma? To get to know God and love him, right? And so we can transcend, hopefully, this repeated cycle of birth and death and disease, right? That's the ultimate goal, quite honestly. I'm not so sure that we can all achieve it in this lifetime, but nevertheless, the reason we have multiple lifetimes is so we can continue to develop that spiritual until it finally makes sense for us that we're not supposed to be really here and we transcend that. Okay, so let's go.
And that advancement that we make, it stays.
And that's the key part. So talking about advancements in material life, well, that starts over in your next life. Whereas the spiritual advances that you make, you start again at the same spot where you left it this time. So whatever advance we make spiritually, it's not lost. We pick it up right where we go in our next life, right where we left it. Okay. The key to not over endeavoring is to align our life with the material and spiritual goals that we have, and that's ultimately what dharma is. So when we start to get out of alignment with those goals, that can be defined as overachieving. Does that make sense? Or we're over endeavoring, right? So I'll give you an example of, or maybe there's an example later. Yeah, Russell? Okay, I'll go. Taking on more than you need is another way to look at over endeavoring, right? So the animal kingdom example, this is where you want me to do, right? Okay, so the lion and the squirrel, they both have different sets of appetites, don't they? So if the squirrel tried to eat with the lion, that's a bit too much, right? But conversely, if the lion was to live off of what a squirrel eats, he would perish because they're two different entities. So that's a good way to look at it from a perspective of that we all have different propensities and different quote unquote appetites of what we're supposed to accomplish in our material dharma. And the key is to stay true to our material dharma. The problem is our brain, our human life, because it's so full of frailties, we have a problem. The problem is we start to do too much, okay? Because the animals, if you think about it, yeah, this is a really good example. So number two is if a bag of rice is placed in a public place, right? Birds will come and eat it. Maybe squirrels will even come and grab what they want. But the human being, right? What are you going to do? You're going to eat and then maybe take some away to save for later, right? And that's the problem. That's the first start. So in itself, taking something and putting away for maybe you need it next time is not the problem necessarily. But the problem is that it's that habitual behavior starts to lend itself to over endeavoring eventually. Does that make sense? Right?
Yeah, it's prashadam is that what we can take.
Yeah. So it's a very nuanced approach, right? It's a very nuanced approach, but so that's why I don't want to make proclamations that are, going to be like, all or nothing. That's not the point. It's okay to sometimes put money in a bank account. That's not what I'm saying. Don't bank money in the bank account. Problem is, if we do this over and over and over again, what we find ourselves in is in a pattern of always over consuming, okay? And that leads to over endeavoring, basically. That's the human problem. Does that make sense to everybody? Okay. So, I thank you, sorry. Okay. Over endeavor also equals misuse of your gifts and talents. The topic of prayasa or over endeavor is about the misuse of higher human intelligence, which can lead to over endeavoring for mundane things that are difficult to obtain. This can include rejecting simple living and higher thinking, which can lead to producing unwanted things. So that's right from the nectar instruction. Okay, so mundane. We try to define mundane, right? And it's temporary or material. Does this start to make sense now, right? So if you invest in the temporary, you don't get to take it with you, right? Like Prabhu said. But if you invest in something that's permanent, you get to take it with you. That's the difference between the material world and the spiritual world. That's it. Temporary, foundationally speaking, that's it, right? The material world is temporary. So if the problem is, as we start to live out our both material and spiritual dharma, it can be distracting. And what happens is we lose sight of the spiritual piece. That's the illusion of this life, right? So the Buddhist philosophy speaks a lot of the illusion, right? And it's not about that it's illusion that it's not here, that we're not really here. That's not the concept that we're trying to. The illusion is we lose our focus from the permanent to the temporary, because the temporary is so hard to just making a living. We were just talking about how hard it is now for us to sustain ourselves with shelter, food, and the basic necessities in life. It's a lot more complex. Here you are coming all the way from India to study here, right? At IIT, just so you can make a living and provide for yourself and your families. What a concept, right? To back in the day where most families own land and that land sustained itself, right? So, okay, so mundane, we've defined it. Does that make sense? Everybody agree with my mundane definition? All right, let's move on. Okay, 2, over endeavoring for mundane things that are very difficult to obtain. So that's kind of what we're trying to get to. Why is this bad for us? It distracts us from our dharma, kind of like what I already talked about. It creates unnecessary stress and agitation. So, okay, I'm not going to pick on my wife and Yashodanandan, but as soon as I saw him today, I'm like, how was your week? Yashodanandan's like, oh my God. A rough week. Rasa had a really rough week as well. Meaning what? Stress and the agitation that comes from stress. Trying to balance your home life and your work life. What to say about your spiritual life and your sadhana. Sadhana means your spiritual practice. Yeah? So it creates that stress and that agitation, which, guess what, is not very conducive for a spiritual life. Because if you ever try to do something spiritual when you're agitated, when your mind is on other things, it can be pretty challenging. You might be able to get through it, but it's not going to be the quality that you want, right? Make sense? All right. So, and what to say about the stress and the agitation that creates health problems too, right? So I didn't even put that down. So, unfulfilling because it is mundane and temporary. How many times have you guys really wanted something, right? And you get it, what happens? You get excited, right? It's fun. You finally got it. You feel a sense of accomplishment, even depending how big it is. Home ownership, or buying a really nice car, or helping your parents, or what have you, right? It can be a really noble goal, at least. But what happens over time? It loses its satisfaction or fulfillment. And then you're on to the next thing. Yeah? So you guys have gone through that? So it's unfulfilling. And why is it unfulfilling? It's because it's temporary. That's the nature of this material world. It's almost like a hamster wheel, right? You just keep going and going and going until what? Till you just die. That's it. Okay, that's not the picture I want to paint for you guys, Lee, but you get the idea. Okay, and at the end of the day, it leads to bewilderment and forgetfulness of our life goals. And midlife crisis is the best example I can think of. You guys are young, so you don't really, may not relate necessarily, but there's a lot of people that are like in my age group that go through something called a midlife crisis. And the midlife crisis is nothing more than misplaced goals. Okay, not aligning your goals with your dharma. And so why does that happen in the US? Well, actually, I can't even say the US anymore because India is just as progressive in terms of materially than ever. So why does that happen? Is because we are taught, one, two, it's very hard to make a living. We talked about, right? And so what happens is we endeavor so much to say, hey, listen, if you get a good education, consequently get a good job that pays you well, you'll be able to accomplish the goal of life, which is to sustain yourself. Okay, that's really what the modern world is all about. And what happens is it is fulfilling in the beginning. It really is when you can care for your family properly, when you're not in need of any necessity necessarily. But what happens is it becomes less and less fulfilling, like we've all experienced in other things. Don't forget, it also happens in our careers. Now, I'm not saying don't finish your degree and go get a great job. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying, if it's by itself the only thing that we're pursuing, then what you come up to is at an age, it can be 40, it can be 35, it can be 55. You come to the point where they can listen, you know what? It's not as fulfilling as I was made it out to be. Same kind of feeling that you go through when you bought that iPhone and it felt great for 3, 4, 5 months, and then all of a sudden it's no longer has its. So what's next? Well, guess what? Somebody who doesn't have a spiritual understanding or foundational background, they don't know what's next. And that's the midlife crisis. And that midlife crisis can go into the same old, routine, which is, oh my God, I'm just going to buy a Porsche. That'll make me feel better. Or sadly, it can really turn into some mental health problems like depression, and it can lead to suicide even. I know a lot of people my age that really struggle with this concept who don't have a firm foundation from a spiritual perspective. Okay? Make sense? Everybody? She said that would be me if I wasn't spiritual. Yeah. The thing about it is, it's true though. If I hadn't found Krishna, if I hadn't started associating with devotees, if I hadn't started to practice my spiritual practice, which I'm still doing, I started later. It could be very despondent. Like, think about it. We all go through ups and downs. Spiritual is not like, a straight upward track by any means. You'll find that out when you start your spiritual journey. And you have some low points. And I can't imagine if you don't have a spiritual foundation, those low points can get very low. That's the point, Okay. Any questions? Yeah.
Show them some Bhaktivinoda Thakur songs, is it?
Yeah. Oh my gosh, yeah, right. And if he's that despondent, can you imagine what we have to go through, right? So anyway, I'll talk about the spiritualist journeys in the sense that, like any endeavor, it has its ups and downs, right? So anyway, so does that mean we shouldn't endeavor at all? Right? Here you are, made so many sacrifices to put yourself in a position to get a great education here at IIT, so you can, put yourself like a step ahead in terms of employment and really maximize your earning potential, right? And here I am on a Friday night telling you guys don't over endeavor. Okay, that's no one's going to show up next Friday. Okay, that's not what I'm saying at all. Okay, so we should find that balance. That's the key, guys. We'll find that balance of fulfilling our material dharma without entanglement, so we have the time and space to work on it and realize our spiritual dharma. Okay, so sounds esoteric to me. So let's put it in practical terms. Practical terms is this: create your everyday schedule. Create your every week schedule, every month, every year schedule, so that you have time for your spiritual practices as well as your material obligations. It's as simple as that. Okay? So if you can, we were all joking because the sad fact of life is your plans don't completely work out that way. But being mindful of this challenge in our spiritual life of over endeavoring helps us to recognize when we are. So for example, Ross and I were just talking about it. It's like, wow, life is getting really hard at work right now for both of us. And so the way I used to be able to get through that was I was routine to get up early in the morning. I'm going to chant my rounds so I can take on this world today. And then, make sure I'm listening to some sort of lectures and make sure we put some budget on, right? Oh my God, it was great for about, how long? We did it for good. The last 12 months, it was really my spiritual practice. But here's what's happened. Circumstances have changed. Our daughters moved in. So challenge of getting up, those things, I don't want to, get into my personal life too much, but the bottom line is, I'm not as disciplined as I was just a few months ago. So what we're having to find out is we're racing to finish our spiritual practices. And then my work has become, its requirements have increased as well for multiple reasons, right? So I find myself in a situation where I'm kind of struggling to finish. Now, remember, finish my spiritual practices. So is that a point? Is that like, am I over endeavoring, do you think? No? Grish says yes, we got no. Anybody else? Who's yes? I'm over endeavoring. Got one hand up, Grish, and it's got two hands up, and then everybody else is no. Okay, who's abstaining? Okay, no? It is, okay? So, but it's a warning sign. Can we agree to that? So if I'm unable to, yes, sir,
I said no to,
over endeavoring.
yeah, over endeavoring, and if you're particular about your spiritual practices.
What's that?
If you're particular about spiritual practices,
Yeah.
you're giving them the, I said no, if that is not an over endeavor.
Okay.
Sorry, my voice is not.
Yeah, no problem. So the point here is it's a warning sign for me. And who's warning me? Rupa Goswami. So it can lead to it talks about the importance of following our acharyas, our elders, our spiritual elders who have gone through all these same types of things. And plus, they also have that special spiritual advancement to be able to see these challenges that come up, right? And so what they warned is all of us are going to go through a time when we're going to find ourselves in an over-endeavoring situation. So for me, this is a big sign to say, hey, listen, I need to adjust my time again. So I have that time for my spiritual practice, or it's going to become it's going to become a blockade. It's going to become a challenge in my life, right? Okay, but here's the other part. This is the positive side to this. Because my challenges at work have increased exponentially, I need that spiritual practice to be able to take that on. I really do. Because if I don't do that, I'm going to be thrown with the whims of my, all these, envy, greed, you name it, it's going to be there. And the only thing that saves me from that is that spiritual practice where I can be in it and then I can come back and say, okay, I understand what the big picture here is, right? So that's the challenge. That's the problem with over endeavoring, right? Okay, cool. Oh, okay, perfect. So Russell was reminding me of Arjun, the monk and the householder. Can you just go back, please? Thank you. So no, we don't. We don't want to. Russell, just leave it like this. This is perfect. Uh, okay. So we want to focus. So I'm going to give you an example of different ways that over endeavoring looks. So for Arjun and the monk and the householder, right? Three different occupations, if you will, right? So for the monk, even the slightest thought of getting a job might be an over endeavoring, right? Like going out and earning money is like, oh my God, no, I can't do that. Right? Whereas a householder, oh my God, you might have to work 3 jobs sometimes to support your family, and that's not over environment. That makes sense? Where Arjun, what did Krishna ask him to do? Fight. Yeah, but what was the goal of this fight? What was he supposed to do? Kill his family, kill millions of people. Millions, right? You think that's what we're never? Not for Arjun, though, right? So, to a monk, any type of work outside of his spiritual practice seems like mundane. And I've heard those terms, right? And to them, it is. It is for them. For others, it's not. So what's the moral of the story? What's the point? The point is we have to find what is too much for us. And then here's the second point. We shouldn't judge other people from the same lens that we have. And this can be, and so there's a point, there's a place I want to go with this, because once I started to adopt, now I haven't mastered this by any means, so please don't think that I'm tooting my own horn or anything. Let's talk about this. It's called envy and jealousy. These two things are hard to overcome, guys. We've all gone through this, where we start to compare ourselves to other people. And then the world where it is, especially in the social media world age, is, I mean, it kind of lends itself for you to compare yourself with other people. And from a material, like from, performance of like having material things, that can be a big deal. Like, you find yourself, hey, what's my friend doing? And so what you have to do is step back. And so you have to step back and meditate on this concept. The concept we started in the beginning, which is we all have special skills and special quota, if you will, in this life to achieve material. And outside of that quota is over endeavoring. And below that quota can be, you're not maximizing your potential. Okay? So this concept, if we can balance this out, this concept of what am I supposed to accomplish in life, leads to what? What benefit do you drive? Or how can you tell that you're in your lane and not in somebody else's lane? Anybody? How about contentment? When you're content with what you have, that's a pretty good feeling. That's a pretty good sign that I'm working in a right balance with this over endeavoring and not over endeavoring. When you can be content. We've heard people say a person who has nothing, but if they're content, they've maximized this life. Whereas there's a person who has everything. And I can just tell you, I just got back from Los Angeles and we met with my owner, and this guy's been making $10+ million for I don't know how many decades. And the man is 59 years old and he is still trying to make more. Okay? And so I was talking to my colleagues. I ended up getting a couple people a raise, and we just talked about how happy we can be with the little things, and how it's not even how happy is we were looking at it from a perspective is, oh my God, I'm so happy that I'm content with what I have. Okay, versus not, right? And so my friend Herschel just walked in, so I can't help but use the example of Elon Musk, because he likes him. And one of my things I wanted to talk about Elon Musk is, he's got a capacity. There's two things. His capacity to do in this material world is up here, not, I mean, anywhere near my capacity, right? So somebody can argue that he's reached that. But then there's a second phase to it, which is he content with what he's accomplished? And it can be argued he's not. So a person who has all this, who had the predisposition to accomplish all this, may not be happy. Right? So contentment is a real barometer to check yourself to see if you're progressing on this path, especially if you're practicing your spiritual practices. Does that make sense for everybody? Yeah? So we're getting to this endeavoring and how it can be a blockade in our spiritual path. Yeah? That makes sense? And it can even be a blockade in our material life, really. Think about that. I mean, if you're trying to keep up with, the Joneses, you've heard of that term, right? You're always trying to make more than your neighbor, if you will, because you're always judging yourself with what your friends have. That can be a pretty lonesome life, if you will. Because you're never happy. You're never content with anything because it's always, Vavesh is always going to have something a little bit better. And so Bakar is going to be like, oh my God, I got to get what Vavesh has. And then Herschel's like, oh my God, have you seen Herschel? Look what he's got, right? And then it's this cycle going over and over again. And it's not a fun one. Okay? So, spiritual endeavor is permanent. So we talked about a lot about the temporary and its challenges. Let's talk about spiritual and its permanence. So the Bhagavad Gita 2.40 says, in this endeavor, there is no loss or diminution, diminution, and a little advancement on the path can protect one from the most dangerous type of fear. So this is also what Guru was saying too, is even a little bit of advancement helps us and we carry with it. But it can also protect us from the most dangerous fear. What's the most dangerous fear, Rasa? What's the most dangerous fear? Huh? Yeah. Yeah. Right? What's that? What's that? No. I'm just saying, is how can a little bit of endeavor can protect you from the most dangerous?
Content with what you have, you won't feel like that is something that's stopping you from doing anything. I mean, you live your life to the fullest and happy intention that you can, you're not scared to care for yourself.
Yeah. So, okay, I like that. Where basically you're saying is if you've lived out your dharma, hey, I can die peacefully. Okay. But that's good. But from a spiritual perspective, as long as we understand that we're not this body, that we're this spiritual soul, that means we don't really die. Right? In Bhagavad Gita, Krishna, that's the first lesson he teaches us, is we don't die because we're not this body. We just transmigrate to a different body because we're a spirit soul. Right? That's another way to look at it. Would you agree? Yeah, so if you live off your dharma, like she said, you can die content and fulfilled. Also, if you have a spiritual understanding, you're not really scared of death because you just move it on. But if you don't have those two things, then you start to, you get scared of death.
But moving on to where?
What's that?
But moving on to where? What that we're moving on, but we don't know where you're moving on to.
There you go. That's a great example too. Another point of advancing spirituality and understanding, where do we go when death happens, right? Next body, right? But if you don't have any concept of that, that creates fear, like insane, right? That creates that fear of, hey, I'm not sure what's going to happen because I don't know that something. But if you ask me an engineering question, I can kill it.
right? And it's important temporarily wise in the material world, if you can kill it from an engineering perspective, absolutely, that's great. But the point is, you also got to be able to kill it from a spiritual perspective, meaning, think about how confident you would be, both materially and spiritually. You guys are all, I think probably 95% of you guys are postgraduate degrees that you guys are pursuing. You're going to become masters in your field, let alone what they say about PhDs, right? But your masters in your material field, you're going to be an expert in it. And how fulfilling would that be? It's great. Think about if you become masters in spiritual practice and spiritual understanding. How confident will you be? How well balanced and well rounded human being you'll be. And that's the purpose of Native Mission Society here. Why are we here? Why do you guys come on a Friday at 7:30? There's no way you would have found me in this hall when I was your age. No way. No way. So think about that. That's already your karma and your dharma playing out. Now you may look back at this 20 years from now and say, oh my God, holy cow, how did Krishna's hand play for me to even go to these Friday programs? Right? But right now you may not think much of it. Yeah. But this is the start of it. That's why you guys are here. Try to create a balanced life for yourself in whatever way that looks like, right? We don't expect you to become monks. Right? Because I'm not a monk, no way, right? But that's not me. That's not you guys. But what you can do is what Krishna's number one message in the Bhagavad Gita is. What is the message? What is his point in the Bhagavad Gita? What is he trying to explain to us? But that? Follow your dharma, right? How to live in this world? How to live in this world without getting entangled and disillusioned by all this material stuff that goes on around us. Like, how do we not start to over endeavor for our bank account, right? But stay in our lane, if you will. And then also develop ourselves spiritually so we understand what's going to happen to us when we die. And at the same time, we fulfill the fact that we live and did our prescribed duty, did our duty of taking care of our family, of our parents, etc., whatever that is, right? Whatever our individual dharma is, right? That's what Friday and Vedic Vision Society is all about, right? Is that it? Okay, so that's the last slide, and this is a perfect time, right? Any questions, you guys, regarding what we were talking about, over endeavoring, and how can that be a determinant detriment into our spiritual life? Yes. You gotta yell.
Yeah, sure. I just want to play devil's advocate a little bit.
Yep.
For someone who doesn't have any understanding that there is something after death, like there's another life, what benefit is it for them?
There's none. Right? So the first question you gotta ask is, just ask that question, what is there? And that starts your spiritual journey. Right? Just, so Prabhupada, who's the founder of ISKCON, we should say, your spiritual journey starts by asking, who am I? Right? Who am I first? And who's God? And what is my relationship to God? And what am I supposed to do? So, we all have been, I can say for myself, I've been exactly where you're at, and we're like, I'm not sure any of this stuff is true, right? Like, who knows, right? But once you start on this path, once you start asking those 3, 4 initial questions, that's when you start your journey, right? And that's when it starts to reveal itself to you what the spiritual path is. Okay? Did I answer your question? Yep. Yeah.
A phrase commonly I hear at least is work is worship. So if I treat my work like worship, then I'm automatically not entangled.
Work is worship, and I'm not entangled if I'm doing my duty. Like because you're offering your work as a service to the China.
Well, I think the phrase work is worship is more, I approach that's my duty, and that's kind of the end all be all of my duty.
All in all.
If I do my job nicely,
Yeah.
I'm fulfilling my purpose.
Yeah, sure. I mean, if it's part of the greater equation of spiritual practice, yes. But if it's the only thing, you're gonna be lacking. There's nothing wrong with that. Your understanding of your next life might be a little bit better, right? So that's another point, right? So work as a duty, his point was work as a duty becomes almost like a spiritual practice, right? And yeah, that can absolutely be argued that way to some extent, but that can't be all your spiritual practice. Does that make sense, right? We all agree that that can't be the entirety of our spiritual life is, hey, I'm just working to provide for my family, and that means I've done what I'm supposed to do. So that's like saying, hey, because I give to charity, because I'm philanthropic, I've done my duty and I've fulfilled my spiritual life. No, that's a component that's important, right? But it can't be all of it, right? Okay. Anybody else? Yeah. That's a great question. That's he said, is there anything called over endowment in our spiritual life? Great question. What do you guys think? Yeses, raise your hand.
Yeah.
Hey, all right. How?
When you ignore your, like, we are talking about dharma, right? So
Yeah,
you are also a husband, you are also a employee. You
yeah,
are also a lot of things. But
Yeah.
when you ignore all that, you become full sannyasi when you shouldn't be, you're a householder.
yeah.
Then it's over and never.
Great answer. Thank you. So we all have a role to play, right? Like I said, we have a quota, if you will, so to speak. Okay, so I'll give you an example. If I try to become a priest and do deity worship, that's not my natural inclination. Now, will I do deity worship? Sure. But if I try to endeavor into a full-on Brahmin that's doing deity worship, that's just not me, right? It's not me. I'm better off trying to stay in my lane as a spiritualist and do what I need to do, which is first to cleanse my heart. That's where I'm at, right? And then if I cleanse my heart, then maybe I can also do some other things, right? So yeah, there is something that's called over-indulgence. Believe it or not, the material contamination of overachieving, over-indulgence, what's that? It can absolutely be in your spiritual life. Okay, so let's think about it. How can that practical example is we are all social beings. We're in a group, in a temple environment or whatever it is, and our material desires, our material hankering play a role in politics to be, oh, I want to do this service. This service is, I'm front and center. I want to endeavor to move up the ladder in the temple. I'm done washing pots. Forever. I'm not staying washing pots. I want to, I want to announce, or I want to, I want to preach. I want to do these things. I want to do deity worship. So absolutely, great question. So remember, we have these qualities from the material. Because we're in this material world, we're unfortunately stuck with these envy, jealousy, greed, and they carry over into our spiritual life, but with enough practice, hopefully slowly those things leave. And they will with our spiritual practice. And then you start to develop qualities like patience and tolerance and kindness. And ultimately it culminates in what? What spiritual practice is all about? Love. Love of God. Right? Yeah, and humility is another one. That's a beautiful quality to have as we grow in the spiritual practice. Cool. Anybody else? Yes.
Says that you are not body, you are a soul.
Yeah.
Can you consider that we are feeling from every much of this at the present time? You see like that. Like to achieve an ultimate freedom, that kind of thing. Does that mean or relate to this? No. Like somewhere?
Okay. So the best way to explain it is this is a process. It's Yeah. So can you do it loud and repeat the question?
So my question is like, I think mentioned in Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says that they're not body.
Yeah.
They are soul.
They are soul, yep.
They are just migrated. So can we consider this that we are free from every materialistic that is currently present? Like to achieve, to gain an ultimate freedom. Ultimately, so that's what our aim is or.
Oh, okay, you're saying you're free from all material contamination in order to see, in order to accomplish your goal of love of God, right? The self-realization. I wouldn't say, this is a great example. So the analogy of a fan is given. So when we're on our spiritual path, right? And this could be actually, I was reading about this with spiritual masters, right? Or really learned people in spirituality in general, but in our movement too. And so the question came is, wait a minute, if they're so realized, how come they're getting angry? Right? A woman, how come he's getting angry? He's supposed to be self-realized. He's teaching. That's your question, right? And the answer to that is, it's like a fan. When you turn off a fan, so a fan is on, you turn it off. Is the fan on or off? Stop. But if it's spinning still, it takes a little while for it to completely stop. And that's how I would say it. You can make spiritual advancement and still have these remnants, if you will, of this material energy that still shows up. And so the trick is, as devotees, to be able to understand what that is. If we're truly true, if we're completely true to ourselves, we understand that, hey, this is just my personality archetype that's still playing. But internally, I'm self-realized. And how are we self-realized? If we understand that our job or our goal is to love Krishna and serve him, right? If we have that in our heart, then those material things, if they're there still, it's not necessarily the indication whether we transcend it or not. But most likely, yeah, right? You'll have a lot less of that. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Yeah.
Version of like so because I said anxiety is there in the spiritual world as well for the spiritual aspect.
Yeah.
Right? So there could be like a twist when you are angry, but it's a spiritual world.
Yeah, no, that's actually true. That's absolutely true. Also is, we still have these qualities like anger. So what she's saying is we start to use anger, but it comes out in our, so if somebody starts to blaspheme, Krishna, then, we'll get angry. Or somebody, my friend, if somebody tries to ridicule him for his faith, I can get angry. And that anger is not the same as just getting angry on some mundane topics, right? So that's what your point is. However, that being said, his question was, do you still have some of these remnants, even if you're advanced spiritually? And the answer to his question is yes. And then your point is a really good one, is his remnants can also be turned into from a spiritual perspective as well, like Hanuman, right? That's a great example as well. So both can be right. Any other questions about over-endeavoring or anything really? We're good with over-endeavoring. Yes, sir.
Yeah, but it's more about transmigration. I mean, still on stuff on that. Okay, remember line.
Yeah.
I'm going to die. I'm not the body.
Yeah.
I'm a spirit soul. But what determines where I go?
So his question is about transmigration of the soul from one body to the next. What determines what body you get and where you go? So a lot of you guys are from Indian background. So you guys have a foundational piece, or at least culturally, or your family's taught you something. Who wants to take a crack at this? Not you, because you took. Yeah, before. Somebody else back there in that section. Anybody? How does the soul transmigrate? What determines what body you get? Right? That's the question. Karma. Okay, but is that karma already predetermined when we take birth in this one? What body we're gonna get next time? No. No?
How does that even matter as long
Okay,
It's a very different system.
okay, perfect. So your point is, I don't really care
Yeah.
as long as I fulfill my dharma, which is my spiritual advancement, as well as my, material responsibility. That's your point. It's a valid one. His point is, if I have a better understanding of what happens to my soul after when I pass away, I will not be so fearful, A. B, I'll be more motivated to prepare for myself, right? So that's his point of wanting to understand what happens to the soul. So basically, the next body that we get is based on the consciousness we develop this lifetime. Just like the body that we have today is the consciousness we develop in our last lifetime, and we get to enjoy it or suffer with our own particular body. Like my enjoyment and my suffering, I've got the perfect body for it. I got my own suffering. Right. Is that?
There's no chip either go up or you go.
Oh, so you get, and you can move up and down. So obviously, human form of life is most important, right? So we all have human form of life right now. It's our responsibility. What's the biggest difference between human life and like a plant or an animal life? We are civilized. What does that mean?
We're meant to be civilized.
We're meant to be civilized. So the point, I think what you're trying to get is we have the ability to make our own, we can discern. We have an intellect.
You can ask questions.
We can ask questions, right? We can determine, like, wait a minute, this doesn't feel right, right? So that discernment, the ability to discern is a privilege. That's why we have this human life. And that discernment, our scriptures and our leaders say, should be utilized to developing our spiritual life, or it's a waste of a life, as Prabhupada would say, right? We're no different than an animal life if all we try to do is what? Yep, eat, sleep, mate, defend. And this is beautiful because this was the class that we were talking about yesterday. All we're really trying to do, this is what Prabhupada breaks it down. He goes, all we're really trying to do, if we don't have a spiritual inclination, is to sleep better. Why? Oh, I got this beautiful condo. Oh, what does that do? Oh, I get to sleep in a nice place. Nothing's really changed, right? Besides sleeping. Mating, eating, and defending. Defending. If I have nuclear weapons, a dog has heat. You're just defending in a better way. But nothing's really advanced, has it? Have you solved the riddle of life, disease, and death? Can you save yourself from death? You're not. But what have you really been doing? That intellect that we have for this human form of life is so important, guys. And the reason it's so important is if we develop our spiritual life, then we can think. And we can get that body that will help us be even more spiritual. If we don't make it completely the Christian. Okay, guys. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, wonderful.
Because I'm just thinking, because we don't remember, Krishna doesn't give us remembrance.
Yeah.
But if we like, if we like to animal's life, then as you're saying, so you don't know, when you come back.
Yeah. So his point is, we don't know what's going to happen to us. The choices we make now, we know we have a human body. Take advantage. Okay. And so I'll end as the Prabhupada usually ends. He's like, so please take up Krishna consciousness. Thank you very much. All right. So this is the prescribed form of meditation in our Sampradaya, which is a little bit of kirtan. And so what we did in the beginning of the class, which is kind of like breathe and meditate, this is the other version of it, right? Kirtan.
And I'll use you one more time for the meditation.
Okay.
It was good. So this time. Mhm.
Beautiful. Okay, so this is beautiful, thought. So as we're doing this call and response kirtan, Prabhu reminded me, Prabhupada used to say that, we have God in our heart as Paramatma. So he gives the example, it's like two birds. One is our individual soul, and the other one is sitting right next to us is Krishna. And all we have to do when we think the purpose of life or spiritual practice is we turn to him.
Especially with my throat.
That bird is sitting right next there, the Krishna is sitting right there. So in this time, when we're singing, we're calling response. When you call out, you're actually calling out to Krishna, who's sitting next to you. And so that reciprocal relationship starts to happen with spiritual practice. So in this kirtan, really hone in on that when you're responding and calling Krishna, you're turning towards Krishna.
Thank you. I'll just sing a simple melody. And if any of you are inspired to dance, come here and do the Swami step. You're welcome. And Prabhu will lead you.
Oh, yeah. Not my dharma.
Oh, Krishna, Krishna,
Thank you very much, Hare Krishna. Sir, Prashad, thank you.
HDMI cable's messed up.
Yeah. Now my Zoom's messed up.
It didn't happen before, did it?
Do some recording saved.